The morning sun painted the lake in shades of gold and amber. When Catherine first saw the wooden sign hammering into her shoreline, 3 men in press suits stood beside her private dock, their city shoes already muddy from the marshy ground. She recognized the leader immediately, Harold Pemberton, president of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association. The same man who'd tried to buy her grandmother's land for half its worth just 6 months ago. Catherine pulled her robe tighter and stepped onto the back porch of the cabin she'd inherited. The lake stretched before her like a mirror, reflecting the towering pines that had watched over 3 generations of her family. This was her sanctuary, the place where her grandmother had taught her to fish, where her mother had found peace. During her father's long deployments overseas, where Catherine herself had fled after her divorce papers were signed, "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying across the still morning air. "That's private property you're standing on." Harold turned, his face breaking into what he probably thought was a charming smile. Behind him, the other 2 men continued their work, one holding the sign while the other drove the post deeper into her grandmother's carefully tended flower bed. "Miss Lancaster, I presume?" Harold approached her porch with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. "Harold Pemberton, HOA president. We need to discuss your situation here." Catherine descended the wooden steps slowly, each creak of the old boards a reminder of the countless mornings her grandmother had made this same journey to tend her garden. "The only situation I see is 3 men trespassing on my land at 7 in the morning." Now Harold chuckled, pulling a folded document from his jacket pocket. "I think there's been some confusion. You see, this Lake Willowbrook lake hit belongs to the community. Has for nearly 10 years now. Your grandmother may have had some ... arrangement, but that died with her, I'm afraid." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. She thought of her grandmother's final months, how the old woman had gripped her hand with surprising strength and whispered, "The lake remembers everything, Catherine. Every promise, every betrayal, every love that's grown on its shores. Don't let them take what isn't theirs." "I have the deed," Catherine said quietly, though her heart was beginning to race. "Clear title to this property, including mineral and water rights dating back to 1952. Harold's smile faltered slightly. "Water rights, perhaps, but not lake access rights. The community purchased those separately through a series of negotiations, ... with various property owners. Your dock there?" He gestured toward the weathered structure that stretched into the deepest part of the lake. "It's actually blocking public access to community property." Catherine followed his gaze to the dock her grandfather had built by hand, board by board, the summer before he shipped out to Vietnam. He'd never made it home to see it completed, but her grandmother had finished it anyway, working until her hands bled because she'd promised him she would. "That dock has been there for over 50 years, Catherine said, her voice stronger now. "Times change," Harold replied with a shrug. "Progress waits for no one. Now, we're prepared to be reasonable. The association is willing to purchase your access rights for a fair price, say $20,000. That should be more than enough for you to relocate somewhere more ... suitable." Behind Harold, the 2 men had finished installing their sign. Catherine could read it now. Private community. Laka Willowbrook, HOA. Members only, no. Trespassing violators will be prosecuted. The irony wasn't lost on her that they were posting no trespassing signs on her own property. "I'm not selling," Catherine said simply. Harold's pleasant facade cracked like ice on a warming pond. "I don't think you understand, Miss Lancaster. This isn't really a negotiation. We have legal precedent, community bylaws, and the full weight of property law behind us. You're one person with an old cabin and an older deed. We're an established community with resources and connections you can't imagine. Is that a threat?" "It's reality," Harold said, his voice hardening. "You can take our generous offer now, or you can fight us in court for the next 5 years while we freeze your assets and make your life here ... uncomfortable. Your choice." Catherine looked past him to the lake where a great blue heron was fishing in the shallows near the old willow tree. Her grandmother had named every bird that visited, had known their habits and their seasons. This place was alive with memory, with love, with the kind of deep roots that city developers couldn't understand. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. Of course, Harold's smile returned, though it never reached his eyes. Take all the time you need. Say 48 hours.
After that.
I'm afraid the offer comes off the table and we'll have to pursue ... other options. The three men departed, leaving behind their sign and a deep sense of violation that settled over Catherine like morning fog.
Oh.
She walked to the end of her dock and sat on the weathered planks her grandfather's hands had shaped.
Oh.
The water lapped gently beneath her feet, the same sound that had comforted for generations of her family. That evening, Catherine spread her grandmother's papers across the old oak kitchen table. Deeds, surveys, tax records, correspondence dating back to the 1940s. Her grandmother had been meticulous, keeping every document in a cedar chest that smelled of lavender and thyme. As she read, a picture began to emerge that made her pulse quicken. The lake rights weren't just about access, they were about control. According to a series of agreements she'd never seen before, control meant power over every dock, every boat launch, every piece of infrastructure that touched the water. Her phone rang just after 9, startling her from her research. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Miss Lancaster, this is Tom Brennan. I live about 2 miles up the lake from you. I heard about your visitors, this morning. Catherine remembered Tom, a quiet man in his 60s, who'd moved to the lake after retiring from the Forest Service. He lived alone in a small cabin and rarely spoke to anyone. But he'd helped her grandmother with heavy lifting during her final years. Word travels fast around here, Catherine said. It's faster than Harold Pemberton would like, I imagine. Tom's voice carried a hint of amusement. Listen, I was wondering if you might have some time tomorrow. There are some things about this lake, about your grandmother's arrangements, that I think you should know. They met at sunrise on neutral ground, a small cove on the far side of the lake where wild iris bloomed purple in the shallow water. Tom arrived in a battered canoe, his weathered hands steady on the paddle despite his age. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, he began without preamble. Smarter than the men who tried to take advantage of her, and tougher than they ever imagined. Catherine waited, sensing there was more. 10 years ago, when this HOA business started, a group of investors came in and began buying up properties around the lake. They had big plans, vacation rentals, boat slips, maybe even a resort eventually. Your grandmother saw what was coming. Tom pulled a thermos from his pack and poured 2 cups of coffee, the steam rising between them like shared secrets. Didn't just fight them in court, he continued. She outsmarted them. See, while they were focused on buying land, she was acquiring something much more valuable. The water rights, Catherine said. Tom nodded. Every single water right on this lake. Dock permits, boat launches, even the stormwater management system for the whole subdivision. Took her 3 years and most of her savings, but she did it. Had help from a lawyer in the state capitol who specialized in water law. Catherine felt her grandmother's presence in the morning mist, could almost hear the old woman's satisfied chuckle. But how is that possible? Harold seemed so confident because most of the homeowners don't know, Tom interrupted. The HOA bought the land rights? Sure enough. But your grandmother owned the water. Every time someone wanted to put in a dock or launch a boat, they had to get permission from her. She just never enforced it because she was a good neighbor. Let people enjoy the lake as long as they respected it. The implications hit Catherine like a sunrise, sudden, brilliant, and completely transformative. You mean you don't? Just own the water rights, Catherine. You control every single piece of infrastructure that touches this lake. Every dock in the subdivision, every boat ramp, every storm drain. Harold Pemberton's fancy community dock. The one that cost the HOA $200,000 to build last year. You could shut it down tomorrow if you wanted to. Catherine stared across the water at the distant shoreline where Lindalore homes sat like monuments to privilege and entitlement. She thought of Harold's threats, his smug confidence, his assumption that she was just another obstacle too. Be swept aside. There's something else, Tom said quietly. Your grandmother left you a letter. Asked me to give it to you when the time was right. I think that time is now. The letter was in her grandmother's careful handwriting. The same script that had addressed birthday cards and Christmas presents throughout Catherine's childhood. My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, then the vultures have come for our lake. I'm not surprised. I've been watching them circle for years. It's waiting for me to die so they could claim what was never theirs to take. By now, Tom has told you about the water rights. What he may not have mentioned is why I fought so hard to keep them. This lake isn't just water and fish and pretty sunsets. It's memory. It's the place where your grandfather proposed to me on a moonlit night in 1951. It's where your mother learned to swim, where she brought you as a baby. To show you the herons and the turtles, it's where I scattered your grandfather's ashes, and they finally sent him home from that terrible war. It's where I've talked to him every morning for 37 years. Watching the sunrise and feeling his presence in the gentle waves, the lake remembers every love story, every heartbreak, every moment of peace found on its shores. Don't let them turn it into just another commodity to be bought and sold. But remember, my dear, power without wisdom is tyranny. Use what I've given you not to hurt, but to heal, not to exclude, but to protect what matters most. The lake will teach you, as it taught me. Listen to its whispers. Trust its wisdom. All my love, Grandma Rose Catherine folded the letter carefully, her hands trembling slightly. Around her, the lake stretched in all directions, holding secrets and stories in its depths. That afternoon, she walked to the Willowbrook Community Center, where Harold Pemberton held court every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Sharp. The meeting room was filled with well-dressed residents discussing property values and landscaping ordinances, their voices carrying the easy confidence of people who'd never had their security threatened. Harold looked up from his position at the head of a polished conference table, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance as Catherine entered. Miss Lancaster, this is a private HOA meeting. Residents only. I understand, Catherine said, placing a folder of documents on the table before him. I just wanted to deliver these in person. Harold opened the folder, his eyes scanning the first document, a notice of water right enforcement signed by Catherine and notarized that morning. His face grew pale as he read further. What is this? It's a formal notice that I'll be exercising. My water rights on Willowbrook Lake, effective immediately, Catherine said calmly. As the controlling party for all water access on this body of water, I'm implementing new usage guidelines. The room had gone completely quiet. Harold's hands shook slightly as he flipped through page after page of legal documentation. Water rights certificates, dock permits, boat launch authorizations, all bearing the signature of Rose Lancaster and now transferred to her granddaughter. This is impossible, Harold whispered. We own the lake access rights. We purchased them. You purchased land access rights, Catherine corrected. But the water itself, the right to put structures in it, to launch boats from it, to connect storm drains to it, those belong to me, always have. She gestured toward the window. Were the community's pride and joy a massive dock? Complex with boat slips for 30 vessels stretched into the lake like a wooden city. That dock you're so proud of, it was built with permits signed by my grandmother, permits that can be revoked if the terms aren't met. Harold's face had gone from pale to red. But you can't do this. We have contracts, investments. So did my family, Catherine said quietly. 70 years of investment in that lake. 70 years of stewardship and care. My grandfather died fighting for this country, never seeing the dock he built with his own hands. My grandmother spent her life savings protecting something she loved more than profit. She pulled out another document, a proposed agreement she'd spent the morning drafting with Tom's help. But I'm not here to destroy what you've built, she continued. I'm here to offer you a choice. You can work with me to create a genuine partnership, one that respects the lake's history and protects its future, or you can keep treating it like your personal playground. Harold snatched the agreement, his eyes scanning the terms. Community. Lake access for all property owners, not just HOA members. Environmental protection standards. Community fund for lake maintenance funded by dock fees. And most importantly, recognition of Catherine's authority as the rightful steward of the water itself. This is actually reasonable, one of the other board members said, reading over Harold's shoulder. Reasonable? Harold's voice cracked. She's holding our entire community hostage. No, said an elderly woman from the back of the room. Catherine recognized her as Mrs. Chen, whose property bordered the lake on the eastern shore. She's offering us something we never had, a real partnership, instead of Harold's dictatorship. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Catherine realized that not everyone was happy with Harold's heavy-handed leadership. I'll give you the same 48 hours you gave me, Catherine said, shouldering her bag. After that, I'll be forced to pursue other options. She left Harold sputtering in his chair, the sound following her out into the afternoon sunshine. That evening, Catherine sat on her dock as the sun painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. The lake was calm, reflecting the changing light like a mirror made of dreams. She could almost feel her grandmother beside her, could almost hear the old woman's gentle laughter on the breeze. Her phone rang him, calling to check on her. How did it go? He asked. About as well as expected, Catherine replied. Harold looked like he'd swallowed a live fish. And the others? Catherine smiled, remembering the faces around that conference table. I think some of them are tired of being bullied too. Change is coming, Tom. I can feel it. Your grandmother would be proud. That night, Catherine dreamed of the lake as it had been in her grandfather's time, wild and pristine, home to eagles and otters, and the kind of silence that healed souls. She dreamed of her grandmother as a young woman, waiting on the dock. For news from overseas, her hands pressed to her growing belly, where Catherine's mother waited to be born. She woke to the sound of hammering. Outside her window, Harold Pemberton was back, this time with a crew of workers and a police officer. They were installing a gate across her driveway, blocking her access to her own property. Catherine dressed quickly and stepped outside. Officer, what's the meaning of this? The policeman looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, I have a court order here. Requesting enforcement of an emergency injunction. Says you're interfering with community property rights. Harold emerged from behind the gate, his smile triumphant. I told you I had resources, Miss Lancaster. Judge Morrison is an old friend of mine. Plays golf at my club every Sunday. Catherine looked at the court order. It was real enough, signed and sealed, ordering her to cease all interference with HOA operations pending a full hearing. This is harassment, she said quietly. This is justice, Harold replied. You can't just waltz in here and threaten an entire community. We have rights too. The police officer looked increasingly uncomfortable. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I have to enforce this order. You'll need to stay off the disputed property until the court hearing next week. Catherine felt the weight of defeat settling on her shoulders. Without access to her own dock, her own shoreline, she couldn't even enjoy the lake she was fighting to protect. But as she watched Harold's workers install their gate, something her grandmother had written echoed in her memory. The lake will teach you as it taught me. Listen to its whispers. That afternoon, she called the County Water Authority. I'd like to report an illegal connection to protected waterways, she said calmly. Someone has installed storm drainage systems without proper permits. The inspector arrived the next morning, a serious young woman named Sarah Martinez, who took water protection very seriously. Catherine met her at the public boat launch, the only place she could still legally access the lake. Show me what you're concerned about, Sarah said. Pulling on waterproof boots, Catherine pointed across the water to the Willowbrook subdivision, where a series of drainage pipes emptied directly into the lake. Those storm drains. They're connected to a system that includes septic overflow and chemical runoff from lawn treatments. But I don't see any discharge permits posted. Sarah pulled out a tablet and began taking photos. You're right to be concerned. Any discharge? Into a protected waterway requires environmental impact studies, water quality monitoring, the whole 9 yards. They spent 2 hours documenting violations, unpermitted discharges, lack of proper filtration systems, chemical runoff from oversized lawns that had been treated with enough fertilizer to poison a small river. This is a disaster waiting to happen, Sarah muttered, collecting water samples. The nitrate levels alone could trigger an algae bloom that would kill every fish in this lake. What can you do about it? Catherine asked. Sarah's smile was grim. I can shut down every discharge point until they come into compliance. And given the scope of these violations, that's going to take months and cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. The next morning, Catherine woke to the sound of chaos. Across the lake, Willowbrook subdivision was in an uproar. County workers were installing barriers around every storm drain. Residents were discovering that their expensive community septic system had been red-tagged and shut down. Pending environmental review, her phone rang before she'd even finished. Her coffee? You did this? Harold's voice was tight with fury. You called in some kind of water inspector. I called in the appropriate authorities to investigate environmental violations, Catherine said calmly. The same violations my grandmother had been reporting for years, apparently. This will cost us millions. Property values will plummet. People will lose their homes. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to play hardball with someone whose family has been protecting this lake for 70 years. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. What do you want? Harold asked finally, his voice defeated. I want what I've always wanted, Catherine replied. A partnership. Respect for the lake and its history. And an end to the threats and intimidation. The court injunction will be dropped when you drop it. And Harold, next time you want to negotiate, try starting with respect instead of threats. It works better than you might think. By evening, the documents were signed. The HOA would work with Catherine to create a genuine community lake management plan. Property owners would have equal access regardless of HOA membership. Environmental protections would be implemented immediately. And Catherine would serve as lake steward. With both authority and responsibility for its long-term health, Harold Pemberton resigned from the HOA board that same week, selling his house and moving to a golf community in Arizona, where the water rights were someone else's problem. Catherine stood on her dock that sunset, watching the water change color as the day faded into night. The lake was quiet again, peaceful in the way it had been during her grandmother's time. But it wasn't the same as before. It was better. Protected not just by love and memory, but by law and community agreement. Tom paddled over in his old canoe, sharing the evening silence until the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Your grandmother would be proud, he said finally. Catherine nodded, feeling the truth of it in her bones. The lake remembered everything every battle fought for its protection. Every generation that had found peace on its shores, every promise kept and every threat turned away, as the moon rose over the water, casting silver light across the gentle waves. Catherine whispered a prayer of gratitude to her grandmother, to her grandfather, to all the voices that had guided her through the fight. The lake whispered back, its ancient voice carrying promises of its own, of protection and persistence, of love that outlasts death, and of waters that remember everything and forgive all who approach them with genuine reverence. In the distance, a loon called across the water, its voice wild and free and eternal. Catherine smiled, knowing that some things were worth fighting for, and that the best victories were the ones that made room for everyone to find their place beside still waters. The lake had taught her well. It would teach others in time. Just as it had taught her grandmother and her grandmother's grandmother, and all the generations yet to come, who would find healing in its depths and hope in its endless patient rhythms.